Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns, and we are back, and we are here in the studio this week, and and we just had an alert that there's going to be, or there was snow already today.
Ho, 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 here comes the snow.
Just so you're catching this, like, we're at the end of March, and I know that there's snow that can happen in March. I'm not naive to that fact, but yet at the same time, like, I also don't like to hear about snow in March or April or May.
Well, and then people who are anti-climate change, and they're saying, well, how can it snow, if the world is warming?
Yeah, and that's a misunderstanding of what the actual climate change issue is.
Yeah.
It's not just, and that's why they changed it from global warming to climate change.
Yeah. Because
it's really like the freak kind of things, that the peaks and like those are signs of climate change.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we might get a bit provocative today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
So, we make it like 45 seconds in. And I'm already like dropping the
we're talking about climate change
for people who are like anti-climate change, and so there's that.
Right.
Another provocative issue, which I personally am more of a state-run. I like the power of law to be in the state more than the national.
Oh, sure.
I think we have our own iceberg issue going on. That national law and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But did you hear about the lynching, the lynching law that got pushed through this week?
I did not.
You need to Google that, and so that you can read up on it. Over 200 times this thing has come up for a vote in the federal government, and this is the first time out of the 200 times that they voted on it.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, lynching is put into hate crimes.
Right, as it should.
That's exactly. I'm like, I'd like to know when the last time is they voted on it. And how in the world could anybody vote against an anti-lynching law?
Yeah. And how can you justify, like, how I've got to bring this back to my people and right? Like, and you have to bring something back to the people of your state that you're saying are going to be for lynching?
Right. Like if you're not against lynching, and maybe this is dualistic thinking. My mind, when I heard that happened, my mind was blown, and I think the 200 votes is over the last 100 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But folks, really. Can't humanity come around and circle around that? This is my why can't we just love each other? Soapbox. Really, to string someone up and to lynch them. To inflict that kind of pain. What?
Right. But I think this even goes. And maybe it became more prevalent with the Ahmaud Arbery. With the three guys who it was a lynching.
Yeah.
This guy was running through. They say, hey, he doesn't belong here. He also, and then they create all these stories like he's casing houses, to be able to rob them later. And so this is their idea. To me, it was a lynching. It was a public lynching of a guy who was out running. Right?
So crazy.
And so I think it brings it back into light where we're saying, like, wait a second, we're not just talking about the, hey, just string them up, kind of lynching either. We're talking about, like, the things that have been happening even as of recent.
Right.
I mean, and how long did it take to convict, the three guys of the crime of Abu Dhabi? I mean, like it's been what, 3 years
Right.
since that happened and occurred. I mean, it took our justice system 3 years to say, hey, that probably wasn't good. I mean, and they convicted them, and I think they also faced not only state, but they also faced federal crimes as well for.
So, and
Yeah.
that's where that there then moves to that, like it's a federal crime, and like, yeah, and then there's some nuances in the bill in regards to like, well, if they lynch the person doesn't die, then there's this, but I mean, and there's also like to conspire, like one person lynching versus like if you're and these are the two fun words for today: innovators and influencers. So, but if you're influencing other people to join you in this kind of thing, yeah, it moves on to. And you know what? That's I think since we are being provocative,
Yeah.
let me just go ahead and stir the pot a little bit more, poke the bear. But terrorism or terrorists aren't people only who live outside of our country and are of a different skin color.
Right.
I mean,
Domestic terrorists.
yeah,
Domestic terrorists who, most of our domestic terrorists are all white.
Caucasian males. Not saying a Caucasian female couldn't be able,
Which,
but I'm gonna drop the weight on the head of Caucasian males. I mean, and so that I just bring that up because whenever here's my own personal bias. Whenever I hear of a terrorist, I don't think of a Caucasian male, and I mean that's my I'm what I'm doing, folks, is I'm just confessing that part of that I have personal biases,
but it's a personal bias. I mean, but it's because we have been
stereotypes.
well. But everything when you have a movie about a terrorist, it's not usually a white terrorist.
Right.
Yes, we have had some movies about like some of them, but the like prominent ones, especially like I just remember in the 90s. I mean, it was always foreign. It was a foreign terrorist, and most likely that foreign terrorist was also brown.
Right.
And in some form or fashion of that was what we would then identify in our brains. When you think of terrorist, you're thinking that. So yes, it is a bias, but it's also a bias that's been implanted in us.
Well, and that's where I would go, that just to bring out when people wonder, well, how do we get programmed to think this way? Well, it's propaganda movies. I mean, it's where people who are making things that we watch, it ends up playing out and acting in our minds like propaganda. And so, it's interesting because I've watched, kind of working through some crime shows and different things like that. But to your point, things that were done in the early 2000s were very much not breaking through the mold. But then in the later seasons, as you go further along, then you see, oh, now they're playing, because then domestic terrorism comes in, and they're like, oh, we've been bent on this in a different way.
So going back to this, so the
lynching law.
Yeah, it's called the Emmett Till. So Emmett Till,
Okay.
Chicago kid,
Yeah.
went down south, didn't know the social norms at the time, whistled, and then got lynched.
Yeah.
So what would you guess would be the vote on an anti-lynching law in the House of Representatives?
How many representatives are in the
So I
House?
think that's a good.
Well, I mean, we're being provocative. We might just as well be informed.
Right, that's true. I mean, this is like government stuff.
Yeah. All the representatives.
So I think there's like 435.
Okay, 435.
So out of 435, what do you think that the vote was?
Okay, and this is not in idealism, right? Like,
I mean, just your best guess on. I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but out of your mind, like you're saying, if I had to make a best guess on what the vote would be, how?
Right, and I'm just trying to clarify that like in my mind, my idealistic, optimistic, non-curmudgeon, old man cynic view.
Yeah.
I would love for it that it should have passed unanimously.
Right.
Like I would love for that to be the case.
Uh-huh.
All right, and now I'm gonna pull up because I don't know all the states of the union. I apparently in this season, I'm just really willing and quickly to share how stupid I am. And so, so I'm going to do one. So I'm going to say at least 17 people voted against it.
Yeah, so that would and it's funny that you mentioned 17. Add 100 to it.
117?
117 representatives voted no.
Oh, you know what? I forgot the multiplier. Because there's 400 and how many?
435.
All right. So if you take 435, this is the math test of our podcast.
Yeah.
So if you take 435, and I know that it's by population and blah, 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 and all that stuff.
And you're also looking at not everybody votes. You know, that's their job to vote, but yet they don't show up for a vote.
So 435, if you divide that by 50, 8.7 times 17 is 147. Yeah, I forgot the multiplier that there are multiple representatives per the state. So I was figuring 17 states. If I would have thought of the multiplier, I would have been really close.
You would have been real close.
Damn.
So we have 117 representatives. Now, sometimes what you look at with these bills that come across.
Yeah, the pork.
Right, there's all the pork. I'm going through this. I mean, they have the actual, the whole thing here. And I'm looking through to find out, did they sneak in anything about
spending?
Right.
Yeah.
Spending, like, what is this going to cost? Like, this doesn't cost them anything.
Yeah.
I see nothing in this bill about costing anything.
And for those who aren't, like, familiar with the political regime of the United States of the Americas, let's just say pork is a slang term.
Right.
That and because little piggies are typically known as fatty creatures, and so it's just one of those terms that's used of, well, if we're going to vote, and then this swapping and trading and this, people are like, well, I'll vote for this as long as you do this for my district.
Right.
As long as this can be put in. Now, this is a bill that is taking a pro-life approach, right? Mm-hmm. It's saying, can we all get together and say human beings should not be lynched?
Right. Doesn't matter what skin color they are. No one should be lynched.
No one should be lynched. Now, here's my next question for our listener. Can't we be those people? I mean, really?
We should.
can't like I'm getting worked up, dude.
I know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You know, man, I've got all kinds of stuff in my head. But so 117. I got the last two numbers right.
You did.
That was crazy.
I know. That's why I'm like, that is it.
But 117.
117.
Do they have the list of the 117 that voted no?
I'm sure they have it somewhere. It's not on the government.
not there.
The government page.
Oh.
But then we have 251 who voted in favor of, which is why it's passed. So 250, we get 350. So we still have almost, little less than 100 people, representatives, either abstained or weren't present for the vote.
Wow.
So
do you call that carbon neutral? Like, are they neutral because they weren't there? Like, hey, I had an important lunch date, or like I needed to be with my constituents.
Right.
That's a direct quote from Brother Where Art Thou.
Right.
Yeah.
Out of those, you can say there could have been some emergency situations. Where
Oh,
they
yeah,
couldn't be
yeah.
Like, we can consider that. Now, was it political that some people sat it out? Because we're looking at this is politics, so there's always those questions that come to mind. Like, so who would want to be against this? Is the crazy part of it. Like, it's and this is where like all of those dumb political things come into play, where you're like, so you're gonna side with somebody or not side with somebody just because it's a political thing. Like, you're gonna say, shouldn't we all be for the anti-lynching of people? Shouldn't we all be against hate crimes? It should be unanimous.
That is when I heard this on the radio, I was just blown away that this same idea has been brought up or at least 200 times, and this is the first time it passed.
Oh, man.
Folks, the commentary on our current present status just gets lined up right here. I mean, really, at what point can we put down the labels of what people say they are? And to me, it's probably not the correct term, but I'm going to throw it out there because I'm being provocative. But, I mean, somebody's got to coin the phrase, it's time to get naked in politics. You know? Like, just strip it all off. It doesn't have to be about, taking a stand to be on a side because you're against someone else. I mean, and that's what I wonder about. Is that what this is well, I can't vote with them because they're not my party.
Yeah, so I was looking at just some of the prompts. So there were 3 House Republicans, one from Kentucky, one from Texas, and one from Georgia, who voted again.
Kentucky?
Yeah. Oh, so I was wrong on the vote. So apparently it was 422 to 3. So I don't know where the other vote was. I don't know why they showed those numbers before. But what we do see is that it is almost unanimous. So I was wrong. I went back in and I'm going to re-report my retraction now instead of waiting until the next episode. So it was near unanimous, with the 3 being...
3 Republicans.
3 Republicans.
Texas.
1 from Kentucky, 1 from Texas, and 1 from Georgia.
And stereotypically, we would say, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the one guy said, this would be the guy from Kentucky. He said, this bill would endanger other liberties such as freedom of speech.
What?
Oh, like, do you want to be that rep?
Well,
This is
the moral code.
right. So I am happy that something like I wasn't. I mean, it wasn't as bad as 117.
So, but for it to be a bill, doesn't the Senate have to approve too?
Yeah. Well, I think that was just the vote in the House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did the Senate, were there any senators that were anti?
Let's check.
Yeah, for a bill to pass, you got to pass the House
Right.
and the Senate, and then the president gets to sign. And on the report, see, that was what really surprised me, because I thought on the report they said it went through bipartisan and blah 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 blah. I mean, 3 votes no. Hey, all right, we're getting less worked up. We're diffusing the situation.
Right. Let's see. The Senate unanimously passed the bill, so 0 senators wanted to take that stance.
And they're a higher class crowd.
Higher class. Well, there's definitely. I mean, there's less of them because
There's 100.
You only get 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big of a state you are.
Right. It's 2.
You get 2.
The gentlemen and the ladies of the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
I yield my time to the.
Because it's really tough to get by, with something unanimous in politics these days.
Oh, I mean, wouldn't it be great if people could figure out how to get along?
So since we're jumping into things that are, already going to piss people off, like
Yeah.
the Ketanji Brown, Supreme Court nominee,
Okay.
who the vote should be coming soon, but they grilled her, which is normal for that process. It's a job for life. So I get it. You're trying to dig into things, but she is like actually out of some of our more recent Supreme Court nominees, she actually has a history with being a judge and a lawyer. Like, so she's dealt with the law for a long time.
Which should be a prerequisite.
You think.
We're using a lot of $5 words here,
You
folks.
think.
Yeah, I mean, like, that should be a prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But it's not.
Wow.
So, and that's where politics comes into play when you're dealing with, especially like Supreme Court, right? You're trying to, as a Democrat, president comes in, they're trying to get more people more progressive. Republicans are trying to have people more conservative, that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I just look at, and I'm not even saying I agree with everything that she has stood for over the court, but to actually say, like, well, this woman shouldn't sit there because she refused to define woman. Like, what is a woman? Like, she's like, well, like, I don't know why does this, but it's this grilling thing that happens that then the conservatives kind of lit her up and said, like, because you're reviewing, like, oh, like, that means, like, you're all over the place and you don't really have a thought. And, like, we're not getting into her politics. We're getting into, how are you going to judge? How are you going to rule? How are you going to sort through the things that are brought before you? So you already know her ideology is more from a progressive or, kind of that leaning of politics. But, like, I don't know. I mean, it to me, it just seems like we were ready to try. I mean, almost like, let's try to be able to figure out any way that we can. I mean, oh man, just got it. So Senator Cruz, he was up there and he's like, printing out these big pictures of books that talk about race, and he's like so concerned about CRT. And he's like, hey, like, look at this. Well, why would we even have, she's like, I haven't even read those books. I don't know. Like, why are you asking me about these dumb things?
Right.
Like, this doesn't have anything to do with my, like, what I'm doing here.
Right.
Like, you're just sitting up there trying to politic because these are the issues you're trying to bring to the next, political race.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, cut
And
it out.
And that's actually how it was reported on NPR. Was that the people who have covered these kinds of things were saying, you know what, this gets into, especially in lieu of the elections and that kind of work that needs to go on based on our calendar. They're like, hey, these Republicans are using this in front of the camera stuff for sound bites that they can be able to use in their, election, and again,
Right.
to impress their constituents.
Yeah, and we know that Democrats do it too. This is the game of politics.
There's the thing,
and it's always
not
going to happen.
It's not anti. That's not where we're at.
Right.
Is we're not saying, hey, how come the Republicans are being jerks right now? When
Right.
I mean,
Right.
everybody's a jerk because it's politics.
Right.
Man, I'm so glad I didn't get into politics.
You were a governor.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, I know.
On the ballot.
Yeah. People are like, you talked about it. Yeah. So episode 2, season 5, I tell the story of my gubernatorial debut. At least, well, I didn't get elected, but I was on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I don't know. So, I mean, like, I just, and to me, I was reading articles about, from other black ladies who have gone through the same kind of rigor of, like, these questions that really have no bearing on, much, but it's like they've been interrogated before for, like, these things, and they kind of felt that during the process. I remember, coming from the kind of the evangelical context, there was somebody, from an evangelical who was a black lady, actually lives in Chicago, and she posted a picture of the Ketanji's daughter looking at her with kind of like beaming. She was happy. She's like, I just hope that one day my daughter looks at me that way.
Huh.
And she put it up on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
And people lit her up. Oh, now you're, for abortion, and you're for the, like, what?
Wow.
What is happening? She simply was talking about the pride that a daughter has for a mother.
Right.
And said, I hope that my kids look at me that one day, like that. And it was all of a sudden, it became political that she was going to put this out there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is the absurdity of where we're currently at in our political, like, culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh, you got me fired up, Steve.
Well, and so when when I was back in Iowa working on the house and stuff like that, and people would come up, we'd have like dinner or chat and stuff. A couple different people have mentioned to me. They're like, "Man, on the podcast, I love it. I love how you guys are. You get wound up, and Phil he brings you back." And in my head, I'm like, that's only because I don't poke Phil or get him wound up. And I knew this thing was gonna be just like,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things where, I mean, like, grab a gallon of gas and light a match on. Oh, hold it, that's lynching. I shouldn't light you on fire. And so,
Steve's trying. He's poking it today.
Oh my word, right? Yeah.
But that's, I don't know, like, when we're dealing with race issues,
yeah.
it seems like, from what I have experienced,
Yeah.
when you talk about these things, is that there are some white people who then say, "Oh, you're just trying to get me to feel sorry, or to make me feel bad about myself, and I'm supposed to wake up every day feeling bad." These conversations are not occurring to be able to somehow like make you feel bad about yourself. These conversations are occurring for a much bigger reason. Like, this is not about you. Why are you trying to make every conversation about you? This is the idea when we talk about privilege. And you have already made every conversation and every discussion about you. Why would we say the issues of race are going to be something that hey, like, I don't want to make anybody feel bad. Like, there are some things in the history of our church, of our nation,
Right.
that have destroyed people,
Yeah.
that have put people down. And to be able to talk about it doesn't say, oh, now I'll just, I'll hate myself because, no.
Well,
It's so that we can do better and be better.
the term I like to use is looking in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really think where change starts is within our own selves.
Right.
Okay. So when you look in the mirror, what do you see? But I can take this and twist it, and we're going to get provocative again. But I would ask anyone listening to this, how do you feel about Russia invading Ukraine? And the children that are displaced, the children who have died,
Right.
the adults who have died, the atrocities being carried out against humanity. How do you feel about that? Now, again, I don't know of people, I don't know people who are for Russia invading Ukraine. My world's really small.
Right.
So I don't know people who are for that.
I don't know people personally that have said it, but so when I'm working out in the morning, I always pick the side where it has CNN next to Fox News.
Okay.
So it's the TVs are right next to each other.
Yeah.
And then based on, you can kind of see what's happening with like this one versus this one. How are they reporting? And there are some moments that apparently, people have backed Putin in these kind of news story, like, Putin was a genius, and then when it was pointed out later on, like, yeah, you were talking about Putin. No, I never said that. Like, no. Like, they're trying to backtrack, and they're like, no, we actually have this
Tape of you saying that.
plethora of information that you've talked about it
Right.
being, oh yeah. But it's so funny how, like, we want to be able to put up, like, yeah, we'll back them, sure, but then you're like, oh, but maybe it's in the way that we would cover it as well.
Yeah. So my point
Yeah.
of bringing that up
Yeah.
is people in the United States need to look in the mirror,
Sure.
because we're all anti, Russia invading,
But
look in the mirror. I mean, how long did we occupy Afghanistan? A long time. 20-some years.
well, you look at most of our I think all of our wars have been about resources. We look at what we did in Saudi Arabia. We look at what we did in Iraq. I mean, well, maybe not Saudi Arabia completely, but
Yeah.
but we look at those, we came in not to say that we're going to make this a part of America. We weren't trying to colonize, but we dropped bombs, missiles,
Right. Drones.
drones, right? That somehow that'll be the faceless way of war now.
Yeah. And so with that indictedness, then, if we look in the mirror, then what we can see is we really ought to be careful on how we're judging. And that's not saying that I'm for the invasion,
Right.
but I am saying we need to look into our core and start asking the question, how are our own personal biases framing us on how we're thinking in a tribalistic fashion.
Right.
It's that mirror work. Like, again, when we started out earlier and I talked about my personal biases, that is getting people to start thinking about what personal biases do you have. And as you're reacting to the insanity of what's going on culturally,
Right.
then at least come into a place to acknowledge that you yourself have personal biases. They shape and form how you think.
Right.
And if it makes you move into a place of being against other humans, you got to back up the bus.
Right.
And and I don't mean over someone, again, a mode of lynching.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you that, that's like over the course of my life, I've moved in probably over the last at least 5, maybe 10 years towards pacifism. Like I think, like there's a definite ugliness of war, and
Yeah.
you can say, oh, but war's necessary. Like, but why is it necessary? Why is, we're spending now, United States, over $1 billion with Ukraine.
Yeah.
So we're funding their war.
Right.
That eventually we also might be looped into this war.
Right.
They're trying to get us to be in this war.
Right.
They're trying to, as Russia's trying to get China into the war with them.
Yeah.
They're trying. So there's like all of this, and you're looking at it, and you're like, and what's the reason? So Russia's trying to frame it and saying we're trying to actually, like we believe, like I think he talked about Nazis in Ukraine, and he's trying to to put down, not like, no, the goal is so that you can claim Ukraine as part of Russia.
Right.
Your goal is to expand.
Yeah.
I believe your goal is to also create the, USSR again, right? So we want to find all these independent, we're once part of USSR. We want to create that again,
Yeah.
right? Because then we're a bigger world power.
Yeah.
Versus, their economy was slipping. Obviously the ruble is, pennies now. So you're looking at how do you get bigger if you're not expanding? How do you get more power if you're not gaining more ground?
Yeah, and for those who were born post USSR, USSR stands for Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Right.
Yeah, which is not Russia.
Which is not Russia.
Right. Russia is probably, I think, out of the whole thing, is the biggest landowner of that grouping. Yeah.
So I just look, so because some people would say, like, pacifists, there's something fundamentally wrong with pacifists, and I'm not saying that we can't have a defense. I'm just saying, like, let's question more our ideals when we're trying to jump into war. What are we actually trying to do? Because there's the statement on the outside, well, we're trying to create democracy where democracy doesn't exist. We're trying to do this or trying to, but like, what's really underneath it as well?
Yeah.
Are we trying to make people like us? And by doing that, we're also going to murder some of them before we get there.
Yeah, at what cost?
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And I know that we don't want to we don't like killing civilians, but have we?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then I come back to that, with military, anyone who's served in the military listening to this would say, oh, these guys are a bunch of kooks, who don't even,
Right.
who don't love me, or, no, I mean, I have complete respect for people who have served in our military
Yeah.
branches and, and things like that. It's not anti-military, and we're not anti-government. It's just like, but we are, and maybe this is an easier way for people to swallow it, that, I mean, we're progressive thinkers in regards to look at it from a different angle than what you're being force-fed. Mm-hmm. Just because it's on a news feed doesn't make it true. Mm-hmm. It's information, but, I mean, and that's the thing. What I find very interesting in all of this is that the fragmentation that we've seen in the last 3 to 5 years on the street has worked itself up the chain towards the large groups, which, I mean, and the fragmentation could have been great, on a national level and stuff like that. But now people are acting out. So, oh, dude, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah, because I agree. I mean, I not anti. I mean, and that's where I'm saying, like, I mean, to have a defense system in place, like, I'm not saying that we should scrap it, but I am saying, like, let's just question more. I mean, so people who serve in the military, I mean, it's a noble pursuit.
But isn't it even in the word defense? Mm-hmm. Isn't defense different than offense?
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's where the difference.
And so, like, to protect, and defend, but there's where the motion of Russia is completely, different in this current situation.
Right.
I mean, they were going on the offense to take over, reign and rule.
Right.
There's if you want to throw it into a Google search, there's some, I think it was a Russian author that called for kind of in a prophetic moment of the United States being broken up into different countries, where states grouped together pull out of the united part of the United States,
right?
And, like, I mean, Texas could be its own nation.
Yeah. I mean, they've talked about those things for a long, whether they've talked about California, talked about Texas. I mean, the state of Illinois has talked about Chicago becoming its own. I mean, like, so
what?
Annexing,
I'd be a fan of that.
Yeah.
I'd be a fan of Chicago being its own state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because holy cow, Illinois. I got my residency established. After a year plus a half, I officially have an Illinois driver's license.
Nice.
I have Illinois license plates on vehicles. I've been living in Illinois. I think part of that is, we got the house sold. So, like, we're no longer dual citizens. But we didn't have Iowa stuff. Yeah. Got our voter cards all taken care of, so I don't know where we're going to vote. Like, this is all being a willing participant in the political arena and stuff like that. But yeah, so dude, I think that, as we were starting this season out, you and I were staying away from a lot of these, topics, because it had been so long. A lot of stuff has happened. But I thought, you know what, let's pick up with current culture in that, and I just wanted to poke your buttons.
You did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How in the world?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure was there.
And if people are wondering, they're like, hey, Steve, how will, like, how did you do that? How did you get them riled up like that? I'm like, anything that is dealing with injustice will get this guy fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, I think, and that's it. I don't know. I mean, there's just a heart towards something that what I see is a little bit bigger, right? There's things at play. I mean, and if we're looking at people who have statistically and historically not had a voice in a conversation,
Right.
like we'd have to, like, why didn't they have a voice? I mean, obviously we look at the unborn and say, yeah, I mean, they actually,
Right. Right.
can't have a voice. I mean, they don't. So somebody has to speak for that. I mean, but you look at the other aspects of, whether it was race, when our country was first, the natives and the people who were present on the land before,
Yeah.
why didn't they have a voice?
Yeah.
What happened, with black people in slavery?
Yeah.
We told them that they weren't human, or at least, not much of human, a little
Right.
bit,
2/3.
right?
Yeah.
So you're just a little bit, so therefore we're already discounting their voice. So even if you say something, we are not even going to take that as, I just watched, I don't know, maybe you watched this, the Last Duel. Have you seen that?
You know what? That's based on a historic event.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had it pulled up in queue,
Right.
but haven't watched it.
Yeah, so I just had watched it. I was on the plane.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
You get some screen time there.
Yeah, but there was just a, so the lady of the house, I mean,
Right.
so she was raped,
Yeah.
right? And so she speaks out. I mean, so the guy who rapes her says, you can't really say anything anyways, because one, your husband might kill you for, this. And if he doesn't kill you, then you also could be burnt at the stake because of your, bringing this out. So she speaks about it. Her husband backs her.
Yeah.
They bring it out. I mean, and this becomes a public setting thing. And the guy's mom says, it has this conversation. She says, you've ruined our reputation. And she said, I was raped.
Right.
And she said, you don't think I was? She's like, I just never said anything because this would be the result.
Yeah.
Like, how sad is that?
Right. Yeah.
That, like, we can't talk about this because of the reputation that might come.
Well,
And it's the same thing when we talk about race, or we even talk about, like, sexual assault. We talk about and it's like, well, then therefore, I mean, are you trying to take a higher, no, we're trying to make this a part of a conversation that hasn't been.
right.
Like, why would we not want to talk about the things that we've ignored?
Yeah.
I mean, that have caused great harm and injustice in this nation. Whatever it might be, like, why wouldn't we want to talk about this? It's like giving voice to the things that haven't had one.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I go back to the Christ, right? Jesus, and he was trying to give voice to things. And yes, we can talk about the whole,
No,
but
no,
I think
that's-
Jesus,
that-
like,
yeah.
he was giving voice to things that didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
And so I'm, kind of taking that kind of call. I mean, and I look at, like, MLK, right? And, he was calling out things. I mean, and he was killed because of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing that happens, right? You put down people who are getting too big, who are calling things out.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to then be able to try to silence it. Like, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to talk about that. It's too hard. It's too difficult. It's, it's meaningless. It's pointless. Like, we don't want to get there. We don't want to be that. I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
So why would we stand silently while these things are going on
Yeah.
and not try to call things out?
Well, folks, there you have it. Right from the mouth of Phil. And this is why. And, we've talked about the Enneagram.
Right.
And I don't know, have you ever figured out what you are?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I like, and that's just where trying to be able, because I went through Roar's teaching
Yeah.
on this, and I found aspects of 1, and I've also found aspects of 3, I think, like 1 and 3.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to be able to try to discern
Sure.
where I'm at in it, because I can see aspects of kind of both.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and that's why I ask, because sometimes when people are like, "Oh, well, you're this," you know, and then it's like, you know, it becomes this thing where, and again, the Enneagram isn't a parlor game. It's
Right.
not a way to like
Put
but-
people in a box and say, that's you.
right. Actually, what it is, and what's really interesting, this is total rabbit trail. Okay, on YouTube, there is a guy teaching about Tesla, and Tesla has this math thing that looks exactly like an Enneagram chart. And so I haven't spent the hour to watch it,
Yeah.
but with my fascination of Tesla,
Right.
combined with the very short path of learning on the Enneagram. And a lot of people jump into the Enneagram so that they can know how to relate with others. I don't believe that that's what the Enneagram was meant for. Like, it's certainly not meant for profiling.
Right.
It can be used in a way that when you are able to identify what the other person's number is, that you can see their core motivations that allow you and help you in interacting to seek to understand before being understood, right? You know, so then you by the identifiers, then you're like, oh, well, so this is why we're butting heads, you know, or this is the reason why what motivates me is not something that motivates the other person.
Right.
But as you were talking through, hey, be the voice for people who haven't been heard, you know, and stuff like that, the thing that came out to me was like, man, this is so much in the 1 grouping. And Roar's a 1. I've also found that since I'm 9-1 wing, I get along with 1s, you know, but the part in 1, the oneness is you look at the world and you see what it could be. And so then ones can be very angry people.
That's right.
And so and then if you're trying to not be angry, you know, then that's an internalization. And so anyway, I just put that out there for people who are like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And then, you know, me as a 9, I'm like the slumberer, you know, it's, you know, elephant whale. It's the one who, I'm like, oh, I could take a nap through this. Yeah. Screw it. We can't make any changes anyway. So that's where my the older I get and the more cynical I get, that's where it feeds into the 9-ness of, but a 9 is a mediator.
Well, and that's where
bridge builder.
I also see, I mean, your 9 with a 1 wing, it leads to your cult leadership as well. Because there's aspects
Let's
of...
not get into that. I don't think I want that in public.
We're going to keep that a secret.
No,
No,
it's
just-
not a secret.
No.
But it's like all of a sudden people are like, so then this gets put on YouTube, and all of a sudden the algorithms are working through and pick up cult leadership, and all of a sudden the observation increases. I want to fly under the radar.
Sure.
Let's not talk about that.
As many cult leaders do.
Oh my gosh. So for the record, everyone, I am not a cult leader. I do not have a cult. I am not. Come on.
Right.
Oh, dude, this is hard.
We don't have a commune yet.
But I do like grape Kool-Aid.
I do like grape Kool-Aid too.
or grape pop. Oh my gosh.
Like Welch's.
Yeah, well, Crush.
Crush.
I like Crush. Oh my gosh. And I can bounce if I got tired of grape. I'd go to the Orange Crush too. And that's just not diet. Oh gosh, you need all the sugary, syrupy stuff. Yeah. I mean, come on.
I say no diet anything, but
Yeah. That's fair. That is fair. Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Last week, and we have chewed up a major part of our hour on the provocative.
We did.
Should I go? How about let's just push our intended topic for next week.
Okay.
I think that, because we
were going to talk about game changers.
Yeah, game changers, and I'm really excited about game changers.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of game changing that you can find in both people, technology,
right,
and everyday things.
Yeah, I just think it would be a fun episode.
Right.
And so instead of us pulling, and have you noticed this? This is really interesting. When people are tired, they go back to what they're normal, like what's normalized,
right.
like and stuff. And so, in a different season, we'd just be like, "All right, let's talk for another hour." But yeah, we got feedback.
Right. And normally we would then, just continue to push in and say, hey, we're going to have 2 segments and, one's the first hour and one's the second hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not going to try to fit. I mean, because I agree with you. I think it's a good topic for, to be able to stand alone.
Yeah.
So, and we wouldn't want to push it.
So for those who are looking forward to the Game Changer talk, that's not happening.
Right.
I mean, it took us 57 minutes to be able to get there to let you know.
Right. But we will get there.
And you know what?
Do next week
on the we'll let everybody know with the Friday trailer.
Okay.
And then that way they're prepped.
Right.
And so, but I've got a list of things that are going to title this out, and I do believe that this episode is fair to put a trigger warning on, because there could be some people who would be like, now I'm in an emotional spiral. Yeah. So I mean,
happen.
Yeah,
that's a real thing.
Yeah. Back to politics. My final thought.
Yeah.
Have you seen Mayor of Kingstown?
I think I watched a portion of the first episode, but I have not gotten back to it yet.
All right. Well, here's the good news from our beloved Taylor Sheridan.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor of Kingstown season 2 is coming.
Oh, already?
Well,
or it's just been renewed and
there is a renewal.
Yeah, because that came out slightly before 1883, right? 1880, like it was.
I think technically, it was it was out before 1883. Yeah. And Taylor and this Hugh Dillon worked on that story and storyline together, and so it's not. But and if people are like, who's Taylor Sheridan? I mean, he is one of the. He is coming into his own as a writer, and producer, and he's an actor. So he does cameos in all of these series,
right?
But from Yellowstone to 1883, and there's going to be another one.
The 4 6s.
Yep, 4 6s, and I think there's like a 1934 coming along.
Yeah, there's that one too. Right,
and stuff. So anyway, but
I think he's trying to create almost like was it Shonda Rhimes, like with her like Grey's Anatomy, like she has a whole, and then Bridgerton is. I mean, Netflix kind of signed her on.
Oh, really?
To create multiple series, and Bridgerton was one of her. I think her first launch into that. So.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Period piece,
Yeah.
but it kind of is also, it's not exactly period piece. So
Okay.
like there's some modern in there. So it's interesting.
Oh. Yeah. So I was just like, well, here's a guy who wasn't elected, but he's called the mayor. Oh yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's dark. Warning.
Before you jump in, you should know.
It's dark. All right. Well,
Yeah.
folks,
That's good stuff.
I think if I could leave us with this closing thought, I would say I'm gonna pull. Can't we just love each other? So then ask the question in our own actions. Note, I'm not saying in your actions, but in our own actions.
Mm-hmm.
What are the acts of loving? And how do you show? Sometimes that's a smile. I mean, hey, and thank God we're not wearing masks in Chicago right now. I mean, so you can smile.
Mm-hmm.
And act. How are you acting towards people who aren't like you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I would say, I mean, if you're asking that question, because love is going to take sacrifice, and in every relationship that I know love has existed, there's also some sacrifice. So in that, how are we trying to be able to carry it out? And it means that sometimes we're going to have to lay down our pride and lay down our biases, and sometimes we're going to lay those down for the sake of someone else.
Huh. Wow. That's really good stuff. Good job.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's big things to consider, big things to talk about, and it's just us right now. I mean, we're sitting in a room, together, but also speaking to you, and hopefully it can lead to bigger conversations in your own life as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, folks.
Cool.
We're going to call that episode 3.
There we go.